Fred Stewart's journey from an Army brat to a respected real estate professional in Portland, born in Wisconsin in 1964, Fred's early years were shaped by his family's frequent relocations due to his father's military service, instilling in him a strong sense of duty and resilience. His dedication to improving living conditions and economic opportunities for Black families in Northeast Portland has made him a notable figure in the city's history.
I'm a community man. Everything I've ever done as an adult, for sure, has been about community. You know, I was born in 1964 in Wisconsin. My dad was in the Army, so that automatically makes me an Army brat. And for the first 11 years of my life, you know, I was all over the place, in Europe, here in the United States, the life of an Army family. And I'm lucky. I got roots in Wisconsin still, but most of my roots, the deepest roots, I think, are out here in Portland, Oregon. And, you know, very much like my grandfather, both of them, very much like my father, and that community was always important. You know, my dad, his community, the big one for him was his family, but then he had a very wide circle of friends. And it was very important to him that everybody around him did good. And that's kind of how I am. I like people succeeding, and I hate people that get in the way of success. I hate it. I hate it a lot. I hate them. Don't like their families too much either. It's just hard for me to tolerate people, especially if you do something that's detrimental to the Black community, especially when it comes to Black economic growth. You know, we've had a lot of Black leaders, self-appointed, as they say. I don't look at them as leaders. I've never treated them as leaders. You'll know what Black people I respect and who I feel is a leader by the way I treat them, because they've earned it. Whether I agree with what they do or not, you know what I mean? But I can say what they're doing, whether I agree with it or not, it ain't hurting nobody. I mean, it's not detrimental. It's not holding Black people back. It's a difference of opinion. You know, intelligent people, good people can have a difference of opinion. But we've got people in the Black community that is what my grandfather used to say. As a matter of fact, Cat Williams had me laughing when he was talking about James Hart. I grew up hearing about plants. My grandfather used to say, white people pick Black people that will help them hurt Black people. He says, never like them. Never like their families. Don't like them, you know, anything about them, because that's the only defense you've got against them, you know. And as I've gotten older, I can see what he was talking about plants. The good thing is, I love what I'm seeing with the Black community right now. We've got some Black people right now that are just incredible. They don't know it. Our white media doesn't talk about them. They're more apt to talk about a gang member who used to beat and exploit women and children and sell drugs, you know, goes to jail for a little while because, you know, exploiting women and selling drugs to Black people, you don't get punished very much for that. White people in journalism feel the story of them finding the Lord is more important and more value than talking about somebody like James Winters, who just developed a company that is now being sold public. He's from Portland, you know. And I can go on the long list of Black people that are just, they're killing it, you know, making history every day, you know. They're honoring the sacrifice of those that became before us. And when I say those, it's not just Black people, it's white people too, you know. No, the white people in Portland, they don't want to talk about those guys, those people, those women. They want to talk about, you know, our failures that finally, after years of hurting people and holding the Black community back, has finally decided they're going to stop. Maybe because they got a bad back down, bad knees, they can't run no more. You know what I mean? They can't run no more, so I better find the Lord, you know what I mean, and get a nonprofit, you know. So going back to who I think I am, I mean, what I've always tried to do is bring value to Portland, bring value to my friend relationships and friends, honor the Black community, bring value to the Black community, you know, be that difference, you know. And most importantly is help people to be successful. That's the most important thing. The way I look at things, when we go, and we're all going to go, it's the little things that you've done that people are going to remember, you know. And eventually, those people that remember what you did, they're going to be gone, and everything is going to be forgotten. So your influence is tangible. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean it's less important. Well, the further it goes out, the less is recognized, which is great. I'm not saying I want to be remembered forever, but I look at the decisions that can be made today that can help people go a better way, and I understand how that extends from them to their family and their family, and so on. So I think it's very important. You know, I'm very proud. I think I've done that, and above all, this is going to sound real corny, I want to honor my mom and dad. It sounds really, really corny. But whenever I'm out, whatever I'm doing, whoever I'm dealing with, my mom and dad, my dad's passed away. They're in the back of my mind. If I can't look my mom and dad in the face and tell them what I did or what I'm saying or how I feel, then I am saying to myself, I shouldn't do this. I'm 59 years old and I still feel that way to this day. So that's kind of important to me too. That's probably something nobody ever thought about. I think the people really close to me know that. Three most important people in my life is my mom and dad, of course, my grandfather, my mother's father, my brother and sister, my daughter. Things like that, they're all important. And I know how I am out in the world affects all of them. So that's who Fred Stewart is. I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Typical, on a very cold December night, snowstorm, and I was born premature. Everybody but the doctor that delivered me and my grandmother, I should say. Everybody but the doctor that delivered me and my grandmother thought I was going to die. And honestly, most babies born like I was did die. And my grandmother told everybody that God had a purpose for me and I wasn't going nowhere. And the doctor, my mother said, boy's going to be fine. No, boy's going to be fine. And after I got out of the hospital, I spent the first 2 months of my life in the hospital. My family immediately moved to Europe. We spent the next 2 years in Europe. I lived in Paris, France. I lived in Germany. We spent a little time in other areas of Europe. One of my favorite stories about Europe, and I don't remember any of it, but it's just stuff that was told to me, was my not father, but my babysitter was a hooker, French hooker. We got a photo of her. And she was basically the nanny for my mom and dad. And then my dad, he went to his grave not being too fond of the French because we were there when de Gaulle kicked us out. They literally kicked the Americans out. It's a piece of history nobody talks about too much because it was so long ago. And my dad hated how the French army treated us. So for the rest of his life, he didn't have too much to say about France other than he loved some of their wine and food. And I'm sure knowing my dad, he loved some of their women too. But, my dad liked women. I can't imagine he had a hard time with French women. But, the thing is, we ended up coming back to America. And when we came back to America, two things happened. My brother was born, and then my dad got his orders to go to Vietnam. And that's where my memory comes in. My earliest memory on this planet was the day Martin Luther King was killed. My family was about 90 miles south of Memphis the day Martin Luther King was killed. And a lot of people up here in the North don't know this, but the Klan and other racist white guys, they hit the road and they went after, let's just say, selected black people. My grandmother and my dad and my mother, they were all worried. So we had to leave New Albany. That's where we were at, New Albany, Mississippi. And as my father and my mother was leaving, my brother and I in the back seat, to sleep. I don't remember any of this. They got pulled over by the Klan. And my father said the only reason that we weren't killed by the Klan that night was my dad was in the Army and he was wearing his uniform. And the guys wanted to know what he was down there for, wearing that uniform. What was he doing? He says, well, I'm down here because next month I'm going to Vietnam. I got my orders. I'm down here in Mississippi to visit my family one last time before I go. So the guys wanted to see my dad's orders. My dad showed them that his orders said he's going to Vietnam. The Klansmen were all World War II vets. And they told my dad, you are one of the good niggers. We're not after you. You take care of yourself. Told my dad where to go, and everything, and said, and get out soon. We don't want you driving around here at night because other guys are out looking, may not be like us, if you want to consider them good. The reason why I think about this story, 1 month from that day, my dad's on a plane to Vietnam. He had a group of white men pointing shotguns at his family, threatening to kill us in his country, in the state that he was born. And a month later, that man went to Vietnam to fight for this country. It's one of the reasons why people who I feel are detrimental to my family and friends, my community, I got no pity for them. Nothing. I don't think they've sacrificed. I got family that I know is sacrificed, and I know people in this town have sacrificed. So, after that, my dad came back from Vietnam. We lived in a few places. Lived in Milwaukee for a little while. Lived in Mississippi for a little while. Hated Mississippi. I still hate Mississippi. And the only reason I would ever run for president of this great country is so I can build a wall around that state and make them people pay for it. I hate that state. Hate it to death. But anyway, going back to Mississippi, that's why we're out here in Portland. My brother and I, especially me, we had such a hard time acclimating to Mississippi because you can imagine a young kids who grew up the way we grew up in a multicultural, multi-ethnic communities, Army brats, sliding into Mississippi. There are white people down there that are my age I still hate. And when I visit down there, I see them, I can't leave the room. I'm talking about, I still hate their asses. It's just me. So we moved out here. My grandfather had been out here since 1935. He moved out here from New Albany, Mississippi, after his father died. My grandfather, my mother, my father, all of my grandparents have something in common. They all dealt with it a little differently. They knew people, knew family, knew friends. They were all lynched. My father and my grandfathers saw people in our family, saw people they knew lynched. So when my grandfather, let's say my great-grandfather died, my grandfather had he had nothing. Mississippi had nothing for him, so he ended up moving out here to Portland, Oregon. Hoboed, came out here to Portland, Oregon. And he said, Portland's got a lot of racist people in it, but the difference between Mississippi and the difference between Portland, Oregon, these people at least let a black man eat. He says, at least they let a black man exist. He says, down south, they try to destroy you in any and every way they can. And he says, at least up here, they let a man eat. And he says, from that moment, he knew this was going to be his home. And for most of the next, rest of his life, it was. For most of it. I mean, there was a few years he lived down in L.A., a couple of years he lived in San Francisco, but 95% of the rest of his life, he lived right here in the city that he loved. My grandfather loved Portland. And my grandfather was probably the biggest influence in my life. His wisdom, his teachings, his experiences, and his expectations. My grandfather was a criminal in this town. My grandfather worked for Tom Johnson. I grew up hearing about all those stories and all those things that those guys did, what they did to protect the black community, because back then the black community did need protection. It wasn't as bad as it was in Mississippi. It wasn't. But it wasn't like there weren't threats. It wasn't like things were perfect. Portland's got racist people, But they had them back then. We definitely got them today. We don't have as many today. We don't. But we still got them. And they're just as annoying. God, they're just as annoying. Man, I think that's one of the top 5 things people I don't like. I mean, I don't like, some of them I just hate. I've had a racist white person said, I can feel your hate. He says, why do you hate me? It's because you're racist. He says, well, that doesn't mean I should be hated. I said, yes, it does. I said, I hate your family. I hate your parents. Don't like anything about you. I'll never trust you. I said, but you can be racist. It's a free country. That means I can also hate you. It's a free country. He told me that was one of the scariest conversations he'd ever had. That made me feel good, because I think white guys like that should feel that way. He should feel that, because I think it's mutual. I mean, to be a racist white person means you want my existence to disappear. You will hurt me. You devalue me, right? Well, he should know, at least there's one, and there's more. I'm not the only one. I'm just more vocal about it, That is exactly the same way about him. I mean, most of the people, I live in Portland, most of the people I love on this planet, if you look at it numerically, are white. I live in a white state. Most of the people that love me are white, which means when I come across a racist white person, I've got a duty to express as much hatred and contempt for their existence as humanly possible, to honor my black family, my white friends, and my black friends. You know what I'm talking about? That's how I honor them. And I revel in that hate, because I'm tired. I think racism is ignorant. I think science and history has proven how ignorant it is. I think one of the problems with black people and people in general is we've tolerated it way too much. We've just been so tolerant. We think by hurting a racist white person, somehow we're not going to go to heaven. Yes, I believe in God. I believe in the Lord, but I'm not a preacher. And I don't think my hatred toward racist white people is going to get in the way of me having a relationship with the Lord. Because if the Lord wanted me to love these people, they wouldn't be racist. In general, though, I feel good about the direction things are going in Portland. I like the things that are going. Like I said, black people are doing things. I like to point out to younger black people a lot of times that I think it helps them to know when they're doing something special, when they're doing something that not too long ago a black person couldn't do or wasn't allowed to do. Because I want them to be more aggressive at what they do. I want them to look at the opportunities in front of them and go for it. Like I told a young man the other day, you got to break your back, dude. You got to go after this so hard that your back gets broken. You're a young man. You shouldn't be sitting up here talking about you're tired. When I hear a young man say he's tired, that man is telling me he's scared. He says, I'm not scared of anything. Well, if you weren't scared of anything, you'd be talking about how sore your back is. You know what I mean? Because you're going for it. I said, I want you to think about your grandfather. I said, you do things, your grandfather, if he had thought about doing it, he wouldn't have been allowed to do it. And I'm sure your grandfather was a smart man, because you're a smart man. Smart kids come from smart families, man. So if you can do this, your dad, your grandfather, your mom probably could have done it too. And the question you got to say to yourself is, why didn't they? They said they didn't think about it. They weren't allowed to think about it, possibly. They weren't exposed to it. They weren't allowed. You got to understand the limitations those before you had that you don't have today. You have no excuse to not go for it and go for it hard. Okay? Yes, we still got racist white people that are going to try to get in your way, but you don't have as many. I don't know what the percentage is, but the amount of racist white people I got to deal with is a lot smaller than what my dad had to deal with. Deal with them. Deal with them like our parents did. That's the example I look at. I think about all the old black leaders like in Portland, even the national ones. I mean, Dr. Enthick at one time was the only black doctor in Oregon. Can you imagine how rough that must have been? Now, my mother was a nurse, and I remember my mother saved the life of a white woman once. She was dying. My mother saved her. The son of that woman attacked my mother for touching his mother. He said, a black person cannot put their hands on my mother. I love her too much to allow that. The doctor said, do you understand this black woman just saved your mother's life? He says, I would have rather my mother die than have the fingerprints of a nigger on her body. Now you see why I hate these folks. You know what I mean? So think about Dr. Enthick coming here, I think in the late 20s, early 30s. Can you imagine the stuff that he faced? And the list goes on. I mean, I got to think of the first black lawyer, who happened to be Mr. Stewart. His last name was Stewart like me, what he went through. First black judge, first black police officer, first black sheriff deputy. I mean, I think about all these guys and what they must have faced and how gracefully they faced it. We know they faced it gracefully because we look at the results, years later. We look at the results. They obviously did the right things and how they handled themselves. Because when a black man fails and he's the first, he fails for us all. We suffer that failure forever until somebody is big enough to come up and overcome that failure. In other words, it's always a setback. And then all these people I've mentioned, and there's others, we didn't have any setbacks. First black city commissioner, Charles Jordan. Some of the stories Charles Jordan used to tell me, we used to have lunch once a month. Some of the things Charles Jordan told me about being the first black city commissioner to this day ring in my head and I think, wow. And it's not so much the stories are significant. The part of the stories that's significant is how that man, his behavior, how he handled himself. You know what I mean? And all of us, everybody who's black and successful and in leadership roles in any company or government in Portland, they owe Charles Jordan a lot. Never talked about. Of course, white media is never going to talk about that. Never going to talk about that. So the one thing I haven't told you about is right out of high school, I joined the U.S. Marine. I joined the U.S. Marines because, it was a family tradition to join the military. My dad was a bona fide war hero. I mean, my dad's medals are insane how much he's got. My dad's jumped out of it, fought in it, ate it, whatever. He's done it all. My dad was a G.I. Joe. He had over 1,700 parachute drums, Can you imagine my grandmother, his mother? She never had ever ridden on a plane, not one time in her life, right? Seeing her son jump out of an airplane and parachute down. Woman born in Mississippi in 1914, watching her son jump out of this airplane. That's the kind of dad I had. So I had to do something. I knew I couldn't do him. I wanted to do better. So I joined the U.S. Marines. I was barely out of the Marine Corps. I jumped headlong into real estate. And jumped into real estate because, love this. I had a choice. I could be a bartender or I could be a real estate broker. And I flipped a coin. And real estate won. So I got into real estate. The guy who recruited me into real estate was a great guy named Dickinson. He owned his own real estate firm, Dickinson Realty. Great guy. Great guy. Gave me a lot of good introduction into being a real estate broker. But to be honest, when I saw the opportunity when I got into real estate, was to get my family out of inner north and northeast Portland. This is late 80s. We had gang members, we had pimps, we had prostitutes, drug dealers, Johns, people coming over. It was not good. It was not good. I had somebody try to break into my mother's house several times. I had people turning tricks in front of my mom's house like that was just what you do. You know what I'm talking about? So I looked at being in real estate as an opportunity to get out of Northeast, because I figured Northeast Portland was just going to burn down. My mother wouldn't leave. My mother would not leave Northeast Cleveland Street. She says, I go to work at Emmanuel. I will only live a mile away. I ain't leaving. I don't know. Some people can do it, but I couldn't. My brother and sister are the same way. Can't turn your back on your mother. She's not going to be there alone. Talking about she's going to stay. Guess what we did? We all stayed. So I decided what I could do is get rid of all the bad neighbors that we had around us. We had a bunch of vacant homes. We had some thugs renting some houses in my neighborhood, people I knew because I grew up with them. You know how it is. You grew up in Portland. You know who the bad folk are. You know what I mean? You know who they are. They know who you are, and you know who they are. So I started with Cleveland Avenue, and I started selling houses. I would go to the owners and talk them into selling the house, and I started selling every drug house and cat house, whatever. If there was a shooting there, that owner was getting a phone call. You know what I mean? If there was a shooting there, if there was a raid for prostitution or drugs, that owner was getting a phone call. You know what I mean? And what was great was two things was going on. The interest rates started dropping, and the mortgage industry changed, where it was becoming easier to qualify. And we're talking about the last years of redlining. Redlining was still there, but it was on its way out. And I believe I was in the room the day it finally was, when I walked out of the room. I mean, it was kicked out. So these changes allowed people to start thinking about real estate and where to buy differently, because it became easier. The only problem with this is the last people to know were the black folks, But black folks, including me, were tired of Northeast Portland and had given up on Northeast Portland. Had just said, I'm done. I want to live everywhere but here. Starting in 1970, black population of Portland started migrating out of Portland. And by 1990, in the 1990 census, if my memory is correct, that's the last census where the population of black people that live in the Portland market lived in Multnomah County than lived outside of Multnomah County. So in other words, more black people lived outside of Multnomah County than inside of Multnomah County in the Portland market. So you're talking about Clark County, Multnomah County, Washington County, and Clackamas County. That's the Portland market, right? 1990 was the last time, if my memory is correct, Multnomah County had more blacks than those other counties. Now, most blacks live outside of Multnomah County. That migration started in 1970, and that's when black people began to give up on Northeast Portland. And when the gangs hit, the gangs are the single worst thing that ever happened to the black community. I hate them all. I won't say I hate them all. I hate most of them. Just two or three I've forgiven. 2 or 3. But they've done the most detriment to the black community more. I mean, it just burns me up knowing that some racist white guy is out there just laughing his ass off at all the damage black gangs have done to us. I just hate it. It just burns me up because they did do a lot of damage. Over 600 black men killed since 1988. That's just since 1988. 600 black men with the average age of 22. Do you know what a monumental loss that is? Do you to put it in perspective? If you look at population size, we would have needed to see close to 25,000 white men in Portland to have been killed to have the same impact. I tell people, imagine Portland. If since 1988, 25 white men you knew were killed by the age of 23. What would Portland be like today? You get what I mean? Well, there you go. What happened to the black community? So, when I look back at Northeast Portland, when I look back at my real estate career, the first thing I ever did was bring equity to Northeast Portland. So black people who did want to live there, like my mother, got some equity. The biggest thing that held black people back before the 1980s was black people had negative equity all the time. We had nothing. No matter how hard we worked, since the real estate we owned was worth nothing, it held us back. Look today. All the black people who kept their real estate in Northeast Portland, look at how they live today. Look at the security they have today compared to black people just 30 years ago. It's a big difference, especially the handful that invested 30 years ago. 90% wouldn't invest in Northeast. I'm out of here. I'm done. I've done my time. But, you did have a few that saw what was coming. And they bought in, or they kept what they had. Look at the change in their life compared to their family 30 years ago. So the next thing that's important, and I preach it all the time, is that black people today, I don't care where it's at in this state, they need to buy real estate. They need to get equity. They need equity growth. They need equity growth because everybody does who lives in a free market society, but they need to also do it because their parents and grandparents, in most cases, weren't allowed to. You know what I mean? If you look at what happened in Northeast Portland, that's why I always laugh when people talk about how great Albina was. You see, I grew up and we call it Inner North and Northeast Portland. Now they call it Albina. Good marketing. But what I'm getting to is black people had nothing. They barely even, cleaned our streets back in the day. Black people, when I first got into real estate, there were black people who owned 20, 30, 40 houses, right? They couldn't go down to U.S. Bank and get a $5,000 loan to put a new roof on one of them. Trust me, I know that happened. I saw it happen. I know a man that tried to use as a collateral 7 paid-off houses. 2 of them in the Irvington neighborhood, right? Just off 8th Street. He was trying to get a $5,000 loan to put to put a roof on a house of his over in Northeast Mallory Street, up the street from where I live today. And guess what the bank said? No. He had plenty of money. He was making plenty of money as far as to service the loan. You know what I mean? He didn't have a big savings, but he had equity. And when you say equity, these 7 homes, they were worth no more than $30,000 each, and probably that's probably pushing it. But you're still talking about over $200,000 worth of real estate. This black man couldn't get a $5,000 loan. So you know what he did? He went to American General Finance. I remember this like yesterday. He got a $5,000 loan at like 29%, lien against one of his houses. They cut him a break because they weren't interested in collateralizing all 7. The guy said, no, mister, we're only going to do one. We're only going to put this on one of your houses, the one that you rent and the one that you're getting the most rental income from. That's the one we'll put it on. Don't worry about the rest. You don't need to leverage the rest. If you consider the period of time, that white guy did that black guy a favor. You see what I'm talking about? That's how bad it was. So selling houses in Northeast Portland, I decided to not only get rid of all of the thugs and bad families and stuff by making them homeless, I wanted to raise the value of all real estate in Northeast Portland because that's where you need equity. If you don't have equity, you have absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. When I led the development of the Harry Jackson Plaza, I'm the guy that named it after Harry Jackson, by the way. when we were putting Adidas there. When I was helping with the finance, putting the finance package together, I had to do what they call a lease study to let the lenders know what the average lease rates were in the area. This is 1996. The average lease rate in inner north and northeast Portland was triple net, $1 a foot. $1. You know what it was in northwest Portland? $25. That's why there was a big difference between Northeast Alberta Street and Northeast 23rd. When you develop a commercial building, when you put a commercial asset in, like a restaurant or whatever, usually the landlord finances those improvements for the tenant with the lease rate of the tenant. So the tenant's actually paying for the improvements, right? But you're getting the loan from the bank to do the improvements and paying back through the lease, right? You can't do much if you're leasing space out at $1 a foot. You can't do anything. No lender on planet Earth is going to loan money for that restaurant. That's why black people who try to put restaurants on Alberta Street and Williams never were able to do anything really professional because they couldn't get the financing just to have the business there. You know what I mean? So I knew I had to increase the equity point for Northeast Portland. So every project I was in, the goal was, get people in the house, people who take care of it, get people in that building, get people who want to do business there. But also, I have to increase equity, have to build equity. The Harry Jackson Plaza completed in 1997. It came in at $16.50 a square foot. If you ever can, take a look at what Alberta Street was like before, Harry Jackson Plaza, and what happened to Alberta Street after. I bet every appraisal on every commercial project for the next 2 years had that business saying it. And next thing you know, I'm hearing that, surprise, surprise, Alberta Street is going for $16 a foot. How did that happen? Now, I got to be honest, I'm not going to take all the credit for that. That's Ray Leary. Ray Leary did that. And I know Ray's going to hate my guts for mentioning his name, but Ray Leary is the reason why Adidas went there. And Ray Leary was the guy that why I was able to put a $16 a foot business on Alberta, which sparked development, on Alberta Street, which sparked it, right? But I was part of it. But I bring this up so people understand how important equity is. That's why I always get mad at people who say gentrification is bad. Gentrification is bad if you're young and you weren't there to, and do the investment during it. But every family deserves equity growth. Every family. This is a free capital society, and we already know what it's like to not have equity growth. Black people have had that since before, the Civil War was over with, and I notice people only bitch about gentrification in areas that black people used to be forced to live in. It's funny. Lentz is changing right now, right? Notice nobody's complaining about the gentrification out there, And Lentz is more aggressive gentrification than Northeast Portland. Much more aggressive, okay? Now, gentrification argument just happens to be where black people live. What happens a lot is black people are forced to live someplace, usually at the benefit of the white community at the time, for their location so black people can get to work and everything like that, Ultimately, that's why black people were allowed to live in Albina, was the transit system. They wanted black people able to get to work. People never thought about that. If you look at the old maps, you'll see exactly all the places they've ever let black people live, with the exception of Vanport, was because of the transit system. The ability for a black person to get to go to work for a white person. That's all it was. Vanport was different. Vanport was because of the war effort, and they put it basically where Delta Park is today because it's between the two shipyards, the Oregon shipyard and the Vancouver shipyard. So then again, it was for the benefit of the white people. Wasn't where black people necessarily Black person did not pick that location for Vanport to be. But they were told that's where they were going to go. Even Albina, like I tell people, Black people were forced to live, where the Memorial Coliseum is right now. They were forced. Up until 1948, the Vanport flood, Black people were not allowed to live north of Russell Street. Now, there are a couple of exceptions. There were a couple of families. There were badass families, like the Petersons. Petersons got on Cleveland and Wygant, I think in 1948, before the flood. You know what I mean? You always got that brother that just, I don't care. I'm not supposed to do this. I'm doing it. Those are exceptions. And God bless them. You know what I mean? We need those. But no, for the most part, if a Black person tried to live north of Russell Street, say they wanted to live near Alberta Street or wanted to live in Walnut Park or Piedmont, yeah, they were going to get a visit from a cop. And that man knew, and that woman knew, their kids are going to get to watch a cop beat their ass, arrest them, and pull them out of that house. So how many Black people wanted to put their family through that? So after the Vanport flood, the city council decided, we'll let Black people live north of Russell. And you know why? Because they didn't want Black people moving into Southeast Portland or Southwest Portland or Northwest Portland. And you know why they were scared of that? When the Vanport flood hit, white people from all over Portland rushed to the flood. And a lot of white families picked up Black people and took them home, put them in houses that they had vacant, bring them to their home. There's a lot of stories about this. Imagine all the white people waking up on that, on the Memorial Day, 1948, and they look across the street and there's a Black family staying there. People were having a hard time. City council went through hell. So they said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to let the Black folks live in Albina, but upper Albina. We're not talking about lower Albina. It was, most Black people that lived in Portland in 47, they lived in Russell Street South, all the way over to where the Memorial Coliseum is. That was their home base. Matter of fact, I think the oldest barbershop is in that area right now. Oldest Black barbershop. Why do you think it was there and not up the street? Black people didn't live around Emmanuel Hospital in the 1940s. They got there in the 1950s. Okay? But, that was, I share that history just so people understand, our history, how we got to where we're at, and what's truly been taken from us. The Memorial Coliseum, that land was literally ripped from Black folks, stolen from Black folks. Inner Northeast Portland wasn't. Black folks gave it up. But they only got it in the 1950s. You know what I mean? They didn't have it before then. You can trace back Black people living in where the Memorial Coliseum is right now to like around 1900. Black people had, if you want to call it, our home base, our community, taken from us, given to white people. And they were allowed to make probably tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars over the years off that land. And when I say Black people were taken off, what I was told, the first building that they tore down was Bethel AME Church. Bethel AME's original location was right where center court is at the Memorial Coliseum. First building they tore down. My grandfather always said they did that to send a message to the Black folks. You're leaving. You're out of here. They tore down Bethel AME. People think Bethel AME, is over there off of Killingsworth, I think on Church Street. They think it's only been there since, the 1950s. The first church was much bigger, much more beautiful, and it was taken from them, basically. I don't think they would say taken from them. They were given next to nothing for it. They had no choice. They were told what they were going to take. It wasn't like in negotiations. And then they were given a deadline. And then there were there were people in the Black community that didn't leave by their deadline, from the Memorial Coliseum project. You know what the city did? Bulldozed the house with all of their belongings in it right in front of them. Yeah, nobody talks about that. When people talk about Northeast Portland being ripped from Portland, Black people, 1980s, 1990s, black people gave it up. Black people gave up on Northeast Portland. They were just done. They had gone through the Memorial Coliseum. They'd gone through Vanport. You know what I'm talking about? If you look at all the things black people did, and then the brilliant guy that brought us California gangs to Portland, Oregon. Are you kidding me? You know, the black criminals in Portland, I knew a lot of them as I was growing up. They were friends of my grandfather. I'm going to tell you, the black criminals of the 1960s, 50s, 40s, much more sophisticated, much more. I tell people, if any of those guys came back today and saw black gangs the way we know them, there would be a bloodbath. It would be horrible. You know what I mean? The black gangs of the criminals before are much more sophisticated. You ask any old cop, you know, what they were like. So the guys that we got, the guys that run around in our community, putting our children and our family at risk with their drive-by shootings and stuff like that, having shootouts at churches, having shootouts at funerals and stuff like that, and concerts. Why do you think a lot of the bands and rap groups and stuff that we love don't come to Portland? You can't insure them because you get 50 black people and you just need one gang member to come in and shoot somebody. You know what I'm talking about? It just burns me up how much that has hurt us. And I don't want to sound like a conspiracy guy, but I swear there's some white guy about 40 years ago said, this is how we get rid of the niggas in Portland. Yes. This is how. And guess what? None of us white guys are going to go to jail. You know what I mean? None of us are going to go to jail. Because look, man, you grew up in Portland like I did. Black people in Portland, we're good people. Black people in Portland are good people. Even our bad people, up until the gangs, we're good people. You know what I'm talking about? It was almost like, like I tell people when I watch Good Times, and you remember, not Good Times, but Sarah's Son, Rollo. Everybody knows Rollo was just a drug dealer, but, Rollo was a good boy. He was a good man. That's what we used to have. Rollo didn't come in and say, Mr. Sanford, I'm going to kill Desmond, Demond, yeah. I'm going to kill him because he stepped on my Nikes. You know what I'm talking about? It was different. And I said, all this stuff I see, I'm not saying black people don't have the blame for it, but I'm telling you, there's some influential white guy that we probably voted for said, hey, if we get this population over here, it's going to be easy to get black people to want to leave Northeast Portland, to get out of the hood. Get my meaning? Because the first black people I sold houses to, that's what they were doing. They wanted out. What I remember a black guy told me when he found out this white guy wanted to pay $40,000 for his house. He said, Fred, I want to close as fast as possible before this white guy changes his mind. That was $40,000. He took that $40,000 and bought a home over in Clark County. Got out of Portland. That is how bad it got. People forget about that. People act like black people don't want their kids to grow up in good schools, safe communities. You know what I'm talking about? Stores. They think that black people are different, that we like violence. We like drug dealing, and I don't care if the hookers are turning tricks in front of my house. You know what I mean? They think that we're okay with that. And that's why I always laugh when I hear these people talk about the good old days and Albina. Those days we were all together. I said, what years are you talking about? You know what I mean? They did documentaries on how much blight there was. The 1980 census is depressing. You read what the black experience was, just reading the 1980 census. It's scary. And then thinking that between 1980 and 1990, hardly anything changed. You understand? You look at the white population, there was change. There was growth. You understand? Look at the black population. Oh, my God. But it gets even worse. You look at the 1960 census of black Portland, compare it to 1990, and understand from a guy like me at the time, knowing that in my entire life, black Portland did not grow hardly at all economically. See, that's one of the reasons why I have a hard time with anybody who gets in the way of economics for black folks. You understand? At the end of the day, we're a capitalist society. We have to make money. We have to earn money. We have to create equity for ourselves and for our communities, no matter what color you are. And if you're not allowed to create equity, then you're just labor. And if you're just labor, you're just exploited. That's it. You're people who are making equity are exploiting you. You understand? And that's why it's important for black people to create equity, to be involved in equitable opportunities. That's why a guy like me over the years has done very little with nonprofits. I've helped a couple of nonprofits, Peace Rai and a couple, in the day. But for the most part, I don't touch nonprofits because nonprofits are a distraction for black folks. There's a couple of exceptions. I'm talking about in general. Not every nonprofit is a distraction, but we have so many. When a young black person tells me I'm starting a new nonprofit, breaks my heart. Breaks my heart because I know they're not building any equity. I don't care what they're doing to help people, and I'm not saying that it doesn't help somebody. There's nothing that's lasting if there's no equity involved. It doesn't last. And we've had too many smart black folks going the nonprofit route. Way too many. Smart people, educated. One of the things I like to tell people is right now in Portland, we've got the most educated, most experienced, most creative black population Portland has ever seen. Just with a bullet. With a bullet. It's one of the reasons why I started Vanport Escrow and Title. I started Vanport Escrow and Title Company because a couple of things. I wanted a company that was local, first and foremost. To be honest, when I first started it, I didn't even know a black person had never done it. A good friend of mine named Paul Matella and his wife are the ones that told me. I've been in this industry all these years. He's been in the industry longer. He's the one that laced my boots and said, Fred, a black guy's never done this before. Escrow and title business is one of the largest part of the financial world because it deals with real estate and it deals with mortgages. Right? When you buy or sell your home, and when you refinance your home, you deal with an escrow and title company, right? And we get a fee for that. So that means our industry is as big as all real estate transactions and as big as all mortgage transactions combined. So it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry in which 99.5% of the population is absolutely white. Anglo-Saxon, good old-fashioned white American. Nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of white people I love. But what I'm trying to say is nobody black, nobody Hispanic. There are many markets where nobody of any non-white race at all is employed at all in any way. This is an OJT industry. You need a high school diploma, you do, or a GED. You don't necessarily need a college degree. It's great to have one. There's never wrong to have one, but if you don't have one, this is OJT. It's one of the few industries where the average person makes near or over $100,000 a year, and it's an OJT position. It's perfect for black folks to get involved in. Perfect. I honestly believe if in 1958, when my mother became a nurse, if she'd known about this industry in 1958, I think my mom would have been all over it. You know what I'm talking about? All over it. She didn't know about it. She was never presented the opportunity. This industry is not friendly toward black Americans. It's not anti-black American, but it's not friendly either. It doesn't recruit. It's like our journalist community. You look at our journalists, with the exception lately of our television journalists, they don't hire black people. Oregonian, they don't hire black people. Portland Tribune, they don't hire black people. Lemon Week, they hired a black person. There would be a war in that corporate, in their boardroom. Those people hate black folks, in my opinion. Hate them. So this industry is just not reached out. They've not prevented, but they haven't reached out. I want Vanport to be the reach out. I mean, I'm not racist. I'm going to hire white people and black people. I'm going to be the example. Vanport's going to be the example of how I think companies in Portland should treat people and how they do reach out to people and build relationships. But I want black people to look at this as a potential career for themselves, all of it, because escrow and title can be a gateway into the financial industry, as far as mortgages and banking, the real estate industry, the construction industry. There's a lot of industries that are all combined that the people who are in this industry are exposed to. Allow people, in this case, black people, to learn what's out there. One of the biggest problems black people have got is access to information. I tell people, it's not that black people are dumb. We just don't know. And we don't know because we've never been allowed to know in many cases. In some cases, there were laws preventing us from knowing. You cannot tell that black person this, or this is going to happen to you. I tell white people, my white friends and family, you don't have a legacy like that. I mean, people do try to hide things from you. They do, but you not come from a culture that was told you're not allowed to not participate. You're not even allowed to know the information to participate. Now, it's changed. We don't live in that atmosphere today, but we got lingering habits, lingering traditions that we've got to break through. And I think everybody wants to break them through. I think white people want them to break through, but we got to do it. First, we got to recognize they're there. Then we've got to break through them. You understand? But we got to acknowledge it. Look what happens to black people when they get a little bit of good knowledge. It goes back to what I said earlier in this thing. You got a lot of people doing some pretty big boy things. You know, my only heartbreak about it, if I had more time, I'd like to do something about it, is there's no, other than you, I should say, there's no instrument in this town talking about that. And it should be. White people need to learn about this, and more importantly, black people need to learn about this. People need to see change is occurring. You understand? They need to be reminded. That is where people, both black and white, learn where they fit in, what they can do, and how to do it. But the powers that be, especially in our journalism community, that's the last thing they want. You know what I mean? They'll do an article on the negative stuff, you know what I mean? But the positive stuff, you know, black people and white people working together to make things happen, you know, they won't write about that. Oh, can't write about that, you know what I mean? But they can write about something negative. We have a population of black guys, black leaders, whatever. They're old as hell now. They won't be here very much longer, you know, that have been gatekeepers. They've not been very sharing in anything. You understand? And I want them to know that there are people that noticed. I noticed. And I don't plan on their family not remembering what they did, the opportunities that we lost out on. I'm very angry about that. The gatekeepers have kept us back hard. It's pitiful. And unlike a lot of people, I'm not very forgiving of it. It's just hard. Especially when I know some of the tragic consequences that we have suffered. Some of the incredible tragic consequences we've suffered. It's just my personality. It's hard. Some of them I can't even be in the same room. You ask them, when's the last time you seen Fred? Well, I haven't talked to that. Why not? Why haven't you talked to Fred? You know, you know what I mean? What a buddy of mine the other day was cracking me up. This one person says, well, I don't like Fred. He says, you know, I've known Fred for 30 years. And you know, he hates you. He hated you 30 years ago. He says, if I went to Fred and told him you liked him, that would piss him off. They go, really? He goes, why does he hate me? He goes, you need to talk to Fred about that. If you can get Fred to talk to you, you know what I mean? You need to talk to Fred. But I know Fred has hated you. He never says anything nice about you. Well, whenever I see him, he doesn't say nothing to you. because Fred's a gentleman. The one I talk about lately, the one that people get the most, is the Trader Joe's. That's the one time, I will tell you, I won't mention their names. There were people, it crossed my mind, should I make the ultimate sacrifice and make sure they and me walk these streets no more? I was so pissed off at what they did to Ray Leary. Ray put together the Trader Joe's deal, which is one of the most complex and hardest organizations on planet Earth to work with. You know what I'm talking about? Trader Joe's tells rich white people to kiss their ass all the time. Excuse my French. But they do. They don't care, you know? And there's a reason for it. They know their business. They know where they can be successful. You understand? And when I heard that man, Ray Leary, got them to want to go to Alberta and MLK, oh my God. You know what I mean? I was like, I have never heard, there are white guys in real estate, right, that brag about getting a return phone call from Trader Joe's. You know what I'm talking about? Hey, they called me back and said no. That means they considered me, right? And Ray cuts a deal with these guys. You're killing me. So proud of him. So proud of Trader Joe's. So proud of my city, right? Some gatekeepers come in and do what gatekeepers do. Destroyed that deal. It's hard. I can't forgive them. I ain't saying I'm ever going to do anything against them, but I can't forgive them. That would have helped Northeast Portland, everybody, and it would have had a black man's name on it. Would have helped everybody. Think about it. Ask anybody, what do you think would have happened if Trader Joe's was on the corner of Alberta and MLK? Find somebody that said that would have been negative. You know what I mean? Everybody from every background would have loved that to happen. That was a, $15 to $20 million project that a black man put together that Gatekeepers came and kicked out and gave. That project ended up in the hands of white billionaires that live in Kansas City and Tennessee, right? That's who got it. That money to buy that property, guess where that came from? For black people. Urban renewal for black people's economic development. That's what it was there for. Who convinced the city to buy the west side of MLK for economic development for black people? Ray Leary. He did it. He did it. Amazing man. I know Ray's gonna hate when he sees this, but Ray, you're amazing. Changed Northeast Portland more than anybody has. Man, people talk about how much I've changed it by all the houses I've sold. I've sold over 730 addresses, over 1,200 transactions in inner north and northeast Portland. You know? That is nothing compared to the impact Ray Leary had in Northeast. And I'm going to stop talking about him because you need to interview him. You need to interview that man. I don't want anybody in Oregon history to forget that man. Black people and white people need to know about him. They do. They need to know about his kids and grandkids. His great-grandkids, who may never meet him, need to know what their great-granddaddy did. You know what I mean? I call him a habitual drop-the-micer. You know, habitual. And I'll tell you another thing, and I've said this to Ray, but I don't think he agrees with me. White Oregon needs to know there's a black man as smart as him out there. You understand? I hope he accepts that one day. I hope one day Ray and his partner in crime, Gina Woolley, Jeff Sackett, it's a white guy, but a good friend. People need to know just how incredible these people are and how incredible Ray is, you know? And there's nobody black. And you guys are interviewing some incredible black people. Incredible, right? None of us, none of them, me included, have had the impact on black Portland and the city of Portland as a black man greater than Ray Leary. Period. And if anybody says they do, say you don't want to be in the same room with Fred and say that when Fred's not in the room. I ain't seen these people that you've interviewed, including me, ain't done our part. We've all done our part, and I'm glad we've done our part. You understand? But, the state of Oregon has Tom McCall. You know what I'm talking about? The federal government has, FDR and John F. Kennedy and, Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, who I'm related to, right? We need a Ray Leary. Because who's the next one after him? You get what I mean? That needs to be in the conscience. So people understand that this happens, that black people can do this and can contribute. It's not that we don't know, but we need the examples. You understand? People need to know where they fit in. And more importantly, white people need to know that guys like him exist. I would hate that white people think that the most successful black man in Portland history as far as for real estate is me. You know what I'm talking about? When I got somebody like Ray Leary running around. You know what I mean? Ray Leary, there's the only reason that that self-enhancement is at Unthink Park. Ray Leary. Okay? And anybody says I'm wrong, tell them to say it to my face. And don't cry when I respond. 2, Adidas. Not just the where they were at on MLK in Alberta, the Harry Jackson Plaza, the Adidas headquarters. Harold Strasser told me to my face, the only reason he approved moving from basically Lake Oswego and Jansen, they kept both of those open, by the way, but their headquarters was in both of those places at one point. The only reason he agreed to move to Greeley was Ray Leary. So next time you drive by that beautiful, headquarters building, say, thanks, Ray. You know what I mean? Look at the impact that it's had from Greeley Street all the way up to Martin Luther King Boulevard. There would be no Mississippi Street and no Williams Avenue if not for guess who? Ray Leary. Okay? West MLK. You drive down West MLK, if you grew up in Northeast Portland, you know what between Alberta and Kelly, and Kellingswood used to look like, right? Why does it look different today? Ray Leary. The Adidas, old Adidas building, the Harry Jackson Plaza. Now, like I told you earlier, I developed it. I was a leader from the owner. I represented the owner, who was Mr. Jack Chung. But who represented the tenant? Ray. Ray got Adidas to make that the first retail outlet for Adidas. And he came in and paid a lease rate that was 16 times higher than the average lease rate in inner Northeast Portland, which, guess what, allowed people to finance deals on Alberta Street. See how this goes? I tell people, you look at Alberta Street before 97 and look at it after and just say, thank you. Thank you, Ray. You know what I mean? That's why you need to get him. Biggest impact. Now look collectively. The economic, quality of life, impact on not just black people, not just inner Northeast Portland, but the city. Those projects have had an impact on. And I think the people of Portland, the people of Oregon, the people of the country need to know that a black man did it. And he's always done it on the damn down low. Can't get that boy to talk about anything. Can't get him to talk about anything. I got guys, they will dig a ditch in a backyard someplace and won a damn award for it. You know what I mean? I dug a ditch. It's perfectly round. No black man's ever dug a ditch on this ground here before. Give me an award. And they will cry when they get that award, like they accomplished something. Then you got black, and Ray's not the only one. Ray's the biggest one. There are other black folks out there that have done the same thing. We got gatekeepers that have done everything to be the one. My grandfather and his friends called them Rolodex Negroes. When you need a Negro to stand in front of all the other Negroes, you call these Negroes, one of these Negroes, and get them there. Tom Johnson, back in the day, let's just say you didn't want him to ever call you a Rolodex Negro, because you probably weren't going to be living in Oregon very much longer, if you know what I mean. You were still going to be here, just not living here. You know what I mean? So these Rolodex Negroes, they get in the way. You can tell by their accomplishments. They've accomplished next to nothing that a white person just didn't give them. You know, appointed them to something. You've been appointed to be the Negro in this organization. You know what I'm talking about? They don't have any skills. They don't have any creativity or anything like that. They're not, you know, and the white journalists love them. You know, they'll sit up and talk to these people and talk about how great it is that I've known you for 30 years. But ask that white person, what have they actually accomplished in the last 30 years? At all. You know? Some of these black folks, some of these, what do you call it, gatekeepers, if they lived anywhere else in this country, in any other community where there's black people in it, they would be absolute failures. They may even be homeless. And trust me, I got some stories, because it's fascinating when a gatekeeper leaves Portland and goes to some place like Chicago, God forbid, Maryland, you know, places where there are other black folks. Oh, the worst one is Atlanta. When a gatekeeper leaves Portland and goes to Atlanta, it always ends up bad for them. It always ends up bad. It always goes bad. They come back if they can get, you know, if they can get back here. You know what I'm talking about? Here in Portland, they're stars. You know, people treat them good. White people are nice to them. Oh, I'm so happy to see you. You know what I mean? But then they get to Atlanta, and they're like, what are you doing? You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're doing. You know what I mean? There's like 100 black people that did what you've done yesterday. And they all did it better. So why do you expect me to, you know, kiss your booty over that? You know what I'm talking about? They all did it. You know, I mean, it has gotten so bad. I won't tell you this guy's name because, well, I shouldn't, because, you know, I'll speak ill of the dead. But remember him, you know, talking about getting this job in Atlanta. He was all excited and got this job. He gets there. And he says, you know, black people here in Atlanta, they don't like black people. The way they're treating me, you know, I mean, so I'm listening to him. I said, well, how are they treating you? He was telling me everything. I said, you're in a professional environment. You're dealing with professionals. They're treating you like a professional. In other words, they're treating you as an equal. See, you're used to being here in Portland, where you were the token. You know what I mean? And they didn't push you. And they didn't want you to quit because they didn't want to get a Negro that was smarter than you. You know what I'm talking about? So now you've done well enough to look good on your resume, and you got this great opportunity here, you know, over in Atlanta, and you're dealing with professionals, and you are now, for the first time in your life, because you lived here in Portland, you're being treated as an equal, as a professional. Professionals expect professionals to be professional. They do. So you've got to make a decision. Are you going to live like they do in Atlanta? You know, if you're going to, you know, hack it, as we called it in the Marines, or are you going to come back to Portland and try to get your old job back? You know, they stayed in Atlanta, and they did very well. But he told me later he needed that come to Jesus, that understanding, you know what I mean, that he's in another world. I won't say it's a better world, but if you're from out here and you become a gatekeeper, whether it's intentional or not, you know what I'm talking about? You get a skewed understanding of yourself. The other thing I hate about gatekeepers is, like I said, they get in the way of advancement for black people. They get in the way. Very few gatekeepers reach back and truly help black people. They don't want to. You know why? They don't want to give up what they got. It can be a great gig to be a gatekeeper. It can be a wonderful gig to be a gatekeeper, you know? And I've worked very hard for the last 35 years to not be a gatekeeper. I kid you not. If I ever once felt like I was a gatekeeper, I would jump off of something high. and I would be landing on something hard. I wouldn't give myself a shot to survive, if you know what I'm talking about. No, we've had that problem. And Portland's had that problem for many years. The only difference is after Tom Johnson, there was nobody to convince gatekeepers to go away after, Tom Johnson died. Tom Johnson, and everybody out there should study who Tom Johnson was. He was the black leader of Portland up until he passed away back in the 60s and 50s and 40s. It's fascinating how nobody ever talks about that guy. And he was very powerful. And he did not like gatekeepers. He didn't call them gatekeepers. He called them Rolodex Negroes. Hated Rolodex Negroes. Hated them. Redlining is something that actually started from the federal government. It was, they had a map. It was an actual map in every major market in this country where the Fed, HUD, said it was too risky to loan. Now, they did this for themselves. They weren't telling everybody to follow, but guess what racist white people did? They got that map and they followed it. So how it manifests itself here in Northeast Portland and Portland, Oregon, is for many years, black people couldn't get, unless you were a veteran, and even then it was harder, okay? It was very difficult to get a mortgage to buy a house. And if you owned the property, it was very difficult to get a refinance or even a loan to, like I said, do some repairs on it. Where a white person would go down to U.S. Bank or Wells Fargo, First Interstate or something or whatever, and get a small loan against their home so you can, fix up the kitchen, fix up the roof or whatever. Black people couldn't do that for many years. They couldn't do it at all. There's always exceptions. Trust me, there's always going to be that one guy, hey, my uncle did this. Well, yeah, your uncle worked for Mr. Charlie, and Mr. Charlie co-signed for it. And God bless Mr. Charlie for co-signing for it. Great man, you know what I mean? But your average black person who owned real estate couldn't do it. You know what I mean? Just couldn't do it. I saw it. When I told you earlier, when I was when I first started selling real estate, there were several black people that owned a lot of real estate, 5+ houses, a couple of them owned, 50+ properties. They were paid off. They bought them all on contract, usually from a white person. And you know how the old black folks were? They paid that stuff off. So after it was paid off, they owed nothing against it. So whether it's worth $5,000 or $40,000, it's all theirs. They owe nothing against it. They couldn't go down to any bank and borrow $1,000 against it to do anything. That's why the city tried to combat that in a way. PDC came up with different programs to help black people do, put roofs on their homes and paint their homes and stuff. That stuff came in the late 80s and stuff, and it helped. But it wasn't as fluid and as effective. The whole process wasn't as effective as a white person being able to go down to a bank and say, hey, banker, I need $5,000 to put a roof on my house. The process. That white guy is going to take about a week maybe. To work with PDC may take 6 months or more. You get what I mean? So there's always a lag. And then there's different issues about equity, equity sharing and stuff like that. So that's what redlining was. Black people were not able to have access to capital, like our white brothers and sisters, as they say, whether it was to buy real estate or to what they call manipulate real estate, develop real estate. And it was so bad in Portland that it even affected white people. And I'll show you how it affected white people, how redlining did. The first white person I ever worked with to buy a house in Northeast Portland, they wanted to buy a house over in Northeast Cleveland, not too far from my mother's house, right? I could not get a single bank to give them a loan. Nobody wanted to work with them. This is a white, and they were well financed. They qualified. They qualified for this, right? There was a house over just off of 20th and Stark, or I should say 21st and Stark, that they wanted, that they liked. They saw that they liked. The same banker that said they couldn't get a qualify for a loan on Cleveland Street approved them for this house off of 21st and Stark. We're talking about a 2-week difference of time here. One paycheck? You think that much changed in one paycheck? They didn't get a raise. It was that brutal, that obvious. The problem was not them, it was where. The bank did not want a loan on Northeast Cleveland Street. And that's why. And I can tell people, it even affected white people. Well, think about that. That affects the ability for equity to grow. If you've capped off or limited how many people can have access to capital to buy. So that's why in Northeast Portland, equity growth was so dismal. Black people owned all this real estate, but the equity wasn't growing because nobody could get loans to buy it in the first place. You know, it's like a treadmill. You know, it's like treading water. It's like treading water is what black people did with their real estate for decades. You noticed about 91, and that's the year that banks walked away from redlining. So it started in 91. You've noticed the equity growth in Northeast Portland from 91 to today. And you know what the big difference is? The buyers' access to capital. The owners, whether you're black or white, access to capital to do improvements. You understand? We can literally pick the year it flipped, 1991. And I ask everybody who grew up in Northeast Portland to think about it. If you can remember 1991, think about the difference between 91 and 2001. And compare 91 to 81. What was the difference? You understand? The difference was 91 was when equity started growing because that's when access to capital became available for everybody. Black people, white people didn't know. The problem with it is black people were the last people to know. You know, and the skepticism. You know, you can't blame a black man, 40 years old in 1991. Somebody say, hey, man, you can get $5,000 from U.S. Bank to put, a roof on your house. That black man may have gone down 10 or 20 times to do that and said no. Why is he going to believe you when you tell him that you now can do it? You see what I'm talking about? Why is he going to believe you? He's going to have stories of how many times he's gone down there and they said no. You see, I dealt with a lot of that. You know what I mean? And people forget that happened. How many times can you beat a man before he just says, I ain't going in for another beating. I'm done, So now, here it is, 2024. A 40-year-old black man was born in 1984. He looks at everything different because most of his adult life, if not all of it, there's been access to capital. It's still not equal to where white people are. It ain't. Don't know why. Because the way the financial markets are, it's so competitive, these guys will loan money to a turtle if they can. You know what I'm talking about? Competition for money on the street is that intense. There's no intentional redlining in the financial markets right now. Not intentional. So I look at the lingering differences between black and white are the legacy, the ghost of the racism that we've all suffered through. It's still there. But trust me, the financial industry, they're so competitive. There's so much money out there. They're working so hard to get it on the street, they will loan it to anybody. You know what I mean? And I'm waiting for somebody to come up with some way to just say, I'll loan money to somebody who's died already if the family agrees to take responsibility. You know what I mean? Come up with, get creative. There's just so much money out there. They're trying to get it out there. There is a difference between black and white people when it comes to getting, access to capital. But make no mistake, black people today have more access to capital than their parents, grandparents, ever did. It's not. My grandfather would freak at how much access to capital there is to do. It's so different. That's why I tell black people, don't be afraid. Hit it. Go for it. Yes, there's some discrepancies. You know what I mean? It's not equal yet. But my hope is over time, the differences will melt away. It'll melt away. But in the right time, in the meantime, you got to look at the opportunities there are right now. Don't let the opportunity right now go because things aren't perfect. One, nothing in life is perfect. I heard this quote. Literally, it's going to be weird when I was in high school, and it stuck with me ever since. It says, there are people in every time and every land who want to stop history in its tracks. They fear the future, mistrust the present, and invoke a security of a comfortable past, which in fact never existed. Portland is a top 20 city. It's a major city. It is a big city. Not the biggest city, but it is a big city. And everybody who lives here should be trying to invest in it and not be afraid. Black Portland, Black Oregon should not be afraid of not just buying in Portland, but Oregon in general. Eugene's a great buy. Salem's a great buy. The coast, especially the northern coast, great buy. Hood River. Look at what's going on in Hood River. That's what I was telling people about distractions when it comes to gatekeepers and stuff. When we're talking about Albina, look at what's going on in Hood River. Why are black folks buying out there? You say, well, not many black people live out there. More black people live in Hood River than you might think. But there's nothing wrong with moving out there. We got black people in high tech. We got black people in the financial services and other service industries that could live anywhere. They work from home. Why not invest in a market like White Salmon, Washington, or Hood River, Oregon, where equity growth is going up and the schools are good and there's good business and a good lifestyle? Look what's going on in Bend. Look at what's going down in Sisters, Oregon. Look at what's happening down there. I want to hear about some black folks saying, I'm going to go down there. And the reason I bring this up, it's been only the last 30 years or so, maybe 40, but for sure the last 30, where all these places I'm talking about, black people could consider buying and investing in without any limitations, right? So I don't want black people being limited by thinking Albina is, I don't even think it's important for us to buy there anymore. There's nothing wrong with buying there. There's nothing wrong. But see, me, I still got the stigma in my mouth that we were forced to be there. That's why it's part of our legacy here. It isn't that black people homesteaded it and said, I want to live here, right? Black people were forced. They were told, you either live here or you don't live anywhere else. And that still sticks in me. I mean, I can't get away from that. But that is what happened. And when I see black people who are buying in Clackamas County, Washington County, Wasco County, and they're doing good and they're happy, you know what I mean? And they're growing economically, I'd rather see that. I want black people going forward to be resistant to gatekeepers, actively resistant. All of us that are successful, because we're a minority population, we owe a little bit to reach back, to share. We do. And most importantly, not get in the way. We got to fight for that because a lot of times the white people we compete against try to put us in front of each other. So we, to defend ourselves against that, need to ask ourselves, am I getting in the way? We've got to stop doing that. This has been going on since slavery. Overseers. Most of the overseers were black. Most of the overseers during slavery were black. Why do you think the white slave owners gave black people that power? They were gatekeepers. You understand? So we as a people, we got to stop this. We got to look for opportunities to work together and above all, not get in each other's way. We just got to stop that. Because, like I said before, it's a weakness. If we allow ourselves to do that, we allow ourselves to be manipulated. Yeah, and that's what gatekeepers do. They manipulate us. They distract us. They hold us back. And it didn't have to be this way. We didn't have very many gatekeepers until the late 60s. We had people who tried to be gatekeepers before then, but they were usually convinced to leave, But after a lot of the old black leaders died, the gatekeepers came in. So if you're a gatekeeper out there and you know it, time to retire. It's time to retire. And before you take your last breath, start sharing what you know. the good and the bad and the ugly. Find at least one or two Black people to reach out to and earnestly help them. Not a token. Somebody really, really who's got a talent, got something to contribute. If you don't do that, there's a lot of people like me who remembers you. We will make sure your grandchildren and great-grandchildren know what you did. Maybe you don't care about that because you're dead. But if you do, just understand that that's what's waiting for you. It's not too late. And this is a great time to be different. Because like I've said earlier, some of the Black people we got running around today, oh my God. It's a shame they don't know how incredible they are. It's a shame. They've done so much and are doing so much and are so talented. So you got time and you got the opportunity. So I hope you take it. Black Oregon will appreciate it for you, and so will white Oregon. Everybody in this state that wants things to be better for all, they will appreciate you. That's my story about who I am and what I'm about, the things that I've done and why I've done them. I hope at the end of the day, people feel everything that I've done has benefited people, benefited the community. When I say the community, I mean both Black and white people, but as a Black man, I want the Black people definitely to benefit from it. Who I hope people think Fred Stewart is, first and foremost, is a good man and honest man. That's very important. I want my family to know that I love them, and I want my friends to know that I care about them. I want the people that I do business with to know that I want them to be successful. I want a young Black person, and you've heard this before, growing up, to look at what I've done and say, I can do what Fred did 10 times better. You know what I'm talking about? I want that. I want them to look at my failures and look at my successes, you understand, and leap up. My plan is to share everything that I've learned, both good and bad, and I let people use it for whatever. They can agree with me, they can disagree, they can tear it up. If a sliver of it helps them become better, then everything I've done is worthwhile. Everything.
For more information about this podcast, go to OregonHiddenLegacy.org.